obviously back then skating was huge. You mentioned Danny White, huge name in skating. Josh Kalis later on, Colin McKay. Some of those guys were massive at this point. Some of these lesser known skaters, I don't want to say, I almost don't want to demoralize them, but some of the lesser known to the general public, I should say.
Okay.
Do you ever look at these clips and see, hey, I can incorporate that, or I can take some of those pieces and maybe try a trick this way? Some from a younger generation compared to just, I don't know, looking up to your mentors like you previously mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I learned from everybody. To be honest, some of my best teachers have been my students.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to be quite honest with you. I have my own perceptions of skateboarding. I came up in a different time and whatnot, and I have good fundamentals. I can break stuff down. What I'm focused on within my skating has been freestyle skateboarding, which you have to basically, within freestyle skateboarding, you got to compose a 2-minute run composed to music, and you can't miss. So it's trick after trick after trick, and using all angles, all axes of the board, right? So it's kind of a combination, think of it as a combination between engineering and art. You know what I mean? It's basically that. And then you have street skating, which I also competed in. And the street skating stuff, especially like the park skating and stuff like that, is, you know, it's one of those ones that you have to keep adapting to the situation. So you're adapting to situations, and it changes all the time. The variables are always changing, so you have to react quickly to it. And you're trying to connect it all together in one continuous line, hopefully, not just at the spot, but skating through the city. You know, because in Philadelphia, that's real street skating. It's not just skating at a spot, you know, whether it's be municipal or Love Park or City Hall, as it were back in the day. Mm-hmm. Is that real street skating was like when you were in the streets and you were skating to a spot. So like you were skating from your house and you go down, say, South Street, and you'd be skating South Street, and then you come down Broad Street, you'd be skating Broad Street, and then you go down, and then you hit up over at City Hall for a while, and you skate there, and then you know, you do your lines or a couple things in there, say hi to some of the homies, and then you go to the next spot. That's real street skating. It's just one after another, you know, not just any. And then you have the vert skating and the bowl skating, which tends to be more in one spot, but it takes a lot of time and dedication to be able to do that. But what's crazy is that the stuff that we show, like, you know, our students here, whether they're young or old, because we teach everybody, everybody comes at it with a different perspective. You know what I mean? Like, for me, like, being a freestyler, my background is more in engineering. Like, that's me. I'm an engineer. You know, that's what I do for a living. When I'm not skating, like, that's what I do, as well as an educator. So I'm looking at it from that perspective, and from everything that I've experienced growing up. You know, so I'm looking at that perspective. And then, you know, we have other friends who are like really, you know, really good at like art, like really high-end, high-level art, and they look at it from their perspective. And then you have people who are in the trades, who do electricians, or you have plumbers. Like, you have people from all different things, and they all bring their different points of view to it, and it's all good and it's all relative. And then it's like, it becomes subjective. It's like, what do you like to do? What do you want to do? So like when we're teaching somebody, we'll teach them in several different ways, because everybody kind of processes things differently too. So from there, they process it and they bring it out. So like, I saw this one, like they came here and I showed them a trick. Like I showed them like a backside rock and roll, for instance. Real simple, going up, rock over, push down, turn. So it's a kick turn and a rock the fakie. Combine that together, you get a backside rock and roll. And the way that they were doing it was just different than like I've ever seen. You know, like they were like getting all the way down and like bringing their knee down to the thing, and then standing up. And then they actually learned how to do it the front side first, besides doing the front. Because they were like, oh, well, backside means my back. So they would turn this way, and they were getting that way, but they didn't understand this way, even though I showed them that, but they came out a different way. And I'm like, how is that happening? You know, so, but then, you know, I would see them like, you know, I'd show them a trick, and then I see them do a trick, and maybe they do it a little different, or maybe they do it better, you know, than I showed them. I'm like, well, that's really cool. You know what I mean? Or like, you know, what else can you do? And then from there, I'll start to see lines that they don't see, because they don't see themselves skating. And then they'll see stuff when I'm skating, like, oh, why don't you try this? Next thing you know, it's not teacher and student, it becomes skaters. You know what I mean? You know, the only real difference is that I've been skating for so long, and I've been able to do a lot with skating through that time, that I have that perspective and that experience. But at the same time, I'm not arrogant in the fact that I can't learn anything new, because that's contradictory to what skating's all about. It should be always learning something new. Like as I was mentioning to you before, my friend Russ Howe, he's 70, 71 now. He's been skating since like 1956 or something like that, right? He's still learning stuff new.
Mhm.
He's still learning. He does stuff that I can't do.
Yeah.
All right, but like, you know, for instance, like he was skating before the ollie. All right, Ollie Geflin didn't invent the ollie until like 1978, something like that, and it was on a transition. And then Rodney Mullen took it to the flat ground, right, which was like 1980, right? By that time, Russ was already a full-grown adult. In 1977, he was like in his mid to late 20s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like by the time that came around, he was like in his 30s. You know what I mean? Like he was almost 30 at that time. You know when that came in, or once it hit 80, he was in his 30s. And so you know that's the one thing he said he always wanted to learn. He can do all the flip tricks. He can do kick flips, old school kick flips. He can flip it every way you want, but he doesn't know how to ollie. You know what I mean? So it's just like, you know, and so he's, and I look at it this way, like, you know, he was the first pro that had his own pro model, and if he can still learn something, I can still learn.